This is a short video presentation on exactly how to use your SkateMate Universal Ice Skate Sharpener. Before we actually get into the sharpening, we urge that you actually look at the instructions. These are shipped with every single SkateMate, and a couple of minutes reading will make you familiar with the instructions, and we recommend that every time. The other thing to think about is what are you trying to achieve, and if you understand skates and blades and the hollows, you'll be better at that than if you don't. So I've represented 3 skate blades here, and what we need to understand is that there's a radius inside, a concave bit at the bottom of each blade, and it's formed, it can be various different depths of hollow. It's known as the radius of hollow, and they can vary from almost flat to quite aggressive. But that hollow, the halfway point of the circle that it forms, should meet the blade exactly at the points here. And then it forms a nice sharp point to give you control on the ice. Generally speaking, the deeper the radius of hollow, the more sideways grip, but there are downsides insofar that you have maybe not as much speed, and there are some control issues with that. But that's actually what we're trying to achieve, a nice sharp point there. Now, if you skate outside especially, as you skate, this will wear down, like all things. If you use a knife, even though it's razor sharp when you start, it'll wear after a while and will need to be resharpened. And exactly the same thing happens with skates. So when it's worn down there, you'll see that it's a broad flat bit that it's worn down to, and we need to resharpen that by starting the curvature again at that point and just re-honing the blade till we get back to nice sharp points. The other thing that happens with blades is that they roll over, the edges roll over. If you do a lot of sliding on the skates, sliding to a halt for example, or spraying ice up, the action of the ice is actually this way on the blade, and it will roll this nice sharp edge over and form a little curve. And you can see from that it won't be sharp, and it won't give you the control you need, at which time we need to deburr the sides of that and recut and hone the blade and sharpen it. There are some tools on the market which claim to do this. They're often a ceramic rod, a bit like a pair of scissors, and you run that up and down a skate blade, but all that does is sort of roll this back over into shape. It's not a very good way of doing it because this is quite weak steel at that point. You'll also notice that the angle of the skate then meets an angle here, so that you get the wrong angle formed to be the right shape for good sharpened skating. So that's what we're trying to do. You've also got to understand that skates come in all sorts of different widths. You can have wide ones, medium ones, very narrow ones. And SkateMate was designed to be able to sharpen any of these. Typically this would be a dance or freestyle skate, this would maybe a hockey one, and that one may be a speed skate. But as you can see, there's different radiuses of hollow, and if you think of our sharpening cylinder on the tool as this piece of paper, when it's pressed into the blade, we need to press firmly enough for it to deform and move out to the sides, right the way out like I'm showing there, so that the sharpening takes place from edge to edge of the blade. And that is the skill that you need to learn in using your SkateMate. Pressed in, it's enough to deform out, and even on these very narrow little skates, if you've got something like a 3/8 ROH, we actually do supply a narrower honing cylinder just purposely for those. But generally speaking, we need to just get used to the idea that our pressing down flattens the sharpening cylinder out so that it will go from edge to edge on the blade. So, having understood all that, we have our SkateMate. We make sure that we undo it enough so that the blades are wide enough to easily fit over the skate blade. And we do that because we don't want to damage these little Teflon strips down the sides, because they're designed to clamp the blade and move up and down. We don't want to damage them. We introduce our skate blade to our SkateMate, and we'll see at this point that it can rock from side to side. Now we don't want that, so it's necessary to tighten it up, and we do that by keeping it nice and even, running the little knurled knobs at the end around and tightening it up. We want to do it evenly because we don't want this side loose and this side tight. They should be parallel, so do it an even amount at each side until we can feel that our SkateMate is gripping onto the blade nicely. When I'm doing this, I actually like to start with the blade tight enough so that I can actually hold the blade with the SkateMate. And at that point I will just back these off just a tiny bit so that I can actually move the blade up and down reasonably easily. At this point I will often come to the edge of a table and, holding the skate in my hand like this, I will put the skate on the edge of a table, press down, and then I've got a nice firm base to work with. A blade that needs quite a bit of sharpening might take quite a few backwards and forward strokes to get it into condition, but generally speaking 6 or 7 strokes up and down on a well conditioned blade is all that's necessary. But one thing to remember is always finish with nice regular strokes from end to end. And what you should see is a nice clean bright bit of steel where you've been honing it, and it should be bright from edge to edge. Now what you've got to understand about skates is that they are concave at the bottom, and the skill that we need to learn is to press down hard enough so that our skate mate is deformed enough to go from blade edge to blade edge. And we do this by putting a marker pen on the blade and putting a black marker up and down the blade, so that will enable us to see exactly where we're cutting metal and where the honing cylinder is in contact with the blade. And the next time I move my sharpening cylinder up and down, I can then examine this blade and I will find whether it's cutting right to each edge or whether I'm only doing it in the center. In this instance I've got clean metal in the very center, but I haven't got clean metal at the sides. There's a little tiny bit of black ink left at the sides, in which case I need to press down just a little bit more to flatten that blade out until I've got nice bright shiny steel from edge to edge, which I've got now. So, having conditioned my blade, I will then finish the job with regular strokes, end to end like that, ending up with a nice shiny center section right the way down. And the only thing that may happen now is that there's a little burr produced on the edge of the blade, and to deal with that we get our skate mate and we use the deburring strips, which are these bits on the top, to just run down the blade either side and just take those deburring strips off so that we end up with a nice sharp perfectly conditioned blade. If you do it properly you'll be able to do what's called the fingernail test, and if I can show you, if I can zoom in here a little bit, if you take your thumb and you run it down the side of the blade, you should be able to take a shaving of the nail with the blade like that. Just light pressure on that. If your blade doesn't do that, it's not sharp. So it's a way of seeing if you've got a nice sharp blade. Do the thumbnail test, and there we have a perfectly conditioned blade ready to take to the ice.